I just want to mention that tomorrow morning is the last Tachnun until the end of Tishrei, because tomorrow is Friday. Friday afternoon is no Tachnun, Shabbos is no Tachnun. Erev Yom Kippur we don't see Tachnun until the end of Tishrei. So tomorrow morning is the last Tachnun. Okay, Erev Yom Kippur again, there's no Tachnun, so there's no Avinu Malkeinu, no Mizmor Seder. We'll get there during the week. Okay. We're in the middle of learning about the Etrog and the four minim. Now, we learned the din that the Etrog has to belong to you. It says in the Torah, Lokachtam lochem. It has to belong to you. So from there, the Gemara learns out not only if it's stolen, it's not kosher. If somebody lends it to you, it's also not good. You have to own the Lulav and Etrog. So the question the Gemara asks, by Sukkos, it also says, Chaga Sukkos Tasel Locha. You should also make Sukkos, which L'chera would imply that it has to be your own Sukkah. Nevertheless, we know the Gemara says, the din is that a borrowed Sukkah is good. You can even walk into your friend's Sukkah without permission to do the mitzvah, because we assume the guy would be happy that people are making brachas in the Sukkah, as long as you leave the Sukkah in the same condition you found it in. Not any worse. So the Gemara answers, what's the difference that Sukkah doesn't have to be yours and Lulav and Etrog have to be yours? So the Gemara said, because there's another pasuk by Sukkos, Kol ha'ezrach b'Yisrael yeshu b'Sukkos. All the citizens of the Yidden will sit in the Sukkah. And the Gemara learns out, what does that pasuk mean? Kol Yisrael ru'uyim leisha b'Sukkah achas. That all Jews are fit to sit in one Sukkah. The fact that the pasuk says, what the Gemara says the pasuk means is that all Jews are fit to sit in one sukkah. Obviously, everybody can't own the sukkah. So from there, Gemara learns out that it doesn't have to be your own sukkah. It says, Chaga Sukkos Tasel Locha, it has to be yours. It means to exclude if you steal a sukkah, or you steal the schach, or the wood, whatever, so then it's not a kosher sukkah. But by Lulav and Etrog, it has to actually belong to you. Therefore, there's a number of issues with the Lulav and Etrog before we even go further with this. And that is as follows. When you come, especially the first day this year, though, is Shabbos, there's no biblical mitzvah of Lulav this year. Because the 7 days of Sukkot that we bench Lulav and Etrog is only rabbinic. The Torah says, Lokachtem lachem b'yom harishon. It should only be yours on the first, it has to be yours on the first day. The Torah only speaks about the first day. Chachamim said you have to do Lulav and Etrog all 7 days. So really, this year, there's no biblical mitzvah of Lulav and Etrog, just like there was no biblical mitzvah of Shofar. Because Shofar is also only the first day. In Shabbos, we didn't blow Shofar. So you can't say to somebody, lend me your Lulav. Because then you're borrowing it, and then it's not your Lulav. It's not your Lulav, you can't do the mitzvah. So the custom is you give it to the person what's called matana al menas lahachzir. You give it to him as a gift, on the condition you return it. There's many dinim in Torah that the Torah says you could do something matana al menas lahachzir. I'm giving you to as a gift, on the condition you give it back. Then when you fulfill the condition, you give it back. Retroactively, it was yours at the time you did it. Because it's a gift, it's yours, and the condition, you give it back. So when you give it back eventually, then it was yours at the time of doing the mitzvah. What? Because, what should you give it? It's a code. No, I'm giving it to, it's yours. You own it now.
You loan something from the bank, don't give it to the
A loan is not. But this is, I'm giving you a matana.
It's an Indian matana.
No, it's not an Indian matana. Indian matana, you have to change your mind, you have to pay, maybe you get cursed mishapara. But this is mamish a matana alpidin, it's a real gift, but on the condition you give it back. Then when you had it, it was a gift. The problem with this is, there's one interesting shaila. What happens if you give a lulav to a boy or girl under bar bas mitzvah? So there's a din in halacha as follows. It's a din in Choshen Mishpat. A kid that's very young cannot acquire anything. He's too young, he doesn't understand. Kinyan means, acquisition means, you know what you're doing. A kid under, we'll see what the age is not able enough, mature enough to understand what they're giving. So, technically even, okay, no, let's leave that out for a second. So, the problem is, after a certain age, if I give a kid something, he could acquire it. A kid 10 years old, halachically, cannot find a lost article in the street and pick it up and acquire it. Because in order to pick it up, to acquire it, if it's free for all, it's a lost object in the street. You might find money in the street. So halachically, if nobody is giving it to you, if the kid acquires it on their own, so the kid can't acquire it. Technically, the Mishnah says, again, the adult can come over to the kid who finds a $100 bill in the street, grab it away from him, because the kid never acquired it. The Mishnah says you're not allowed to do that because it's going to be kicking and biting and fighting and scratching. So Chum said, the kid finds it, you're not allowed to take it away from him. But if I give something to a kid, 10-year-old kid, the fact that I'm giving, I'm an adult, I'm giving, and the kid is receiving, so after a certain age, that the Gemara says the din is, the Gemara says, but the Shulchan Aruch says the din is, if he knows the difference between something good and a stone. Money he'll keep and the stone he'll just throw away. He's mature enough to understand the difference between a stone and something, valuable. And starting from that age, if an adult gives it to the kid acquires it. The problem is, a kid until bar and bas mitzvah cannot give something back to somebody. They can only take. If I give it to them, my giving and their slight maturity, so to speak, is able for them to accept it. But they can't give it. So let's say I have a 10-year-old kid, and I give him my Lulav and Etrog, so he can acquire it. The problem is he can't give it back to me. So therefore, from that day on, I'm not benching with my own Lulav and Etrog. L'chatchila, all 7 days of Sukkot, you need to have it, that's your own. So therefore, what you're supposed to do is you never give it to them. You let them use it as chinuch, but you never actually give it to them. Or they have their own Lulav and Etrog.
But why? Since, for example, for tefillin, you don't acquire it.
Tefillin doesn't have to be yours.
But why would the Lulav have to be mine?
Because the Torah says, "L'kachtem lochem." The Torah doesn't say "L'kachtem b'yemer." There is a lochem. It has to be yours.
So they come to the table and take it?
By the way, it would be an interesting shaila. What happens if a 10-year-old kid has his own Lulav and Etrog? Okay, and they're going on mivtzoim. It's on the first day when it has to be yours, right? So the kid can't use his own Lulav and Etrog for mivtzoim because the people he's been to bench Lulav and Etrog with, he can't give it to them to acquire because he's not bar bas mitzvah yet. That's an interesting thing in itself. But afterwards, then it's not an issue. And the second day already, it's not as much. But it's l'chatchila, it should be lochem all the days of Pesach. What?
In the second day, in the last days, the kid can give it, or you can give it to the kid, and it won't be an issue?
L'chatchila should still be lochem all days of Pesach.
Right.
But the yavid, if it's not the first day you eat.
As long as you don't give it, he just takes it, it's okay. He took it on his own.
Yeah, if you don't give it to him, or when you give it to him, some people were makbid, the father would hold on to the lulav, But if your mind is, I'm not giving it to them, I'm letting him use it for chinuch, he's not obligated in the mitzvah. He's using it because to educate himself in doing the mitzvah. So it doesn't have to be his. It has to do the, bench the lulav and Etrog.
Let's say in shul you have Lulav and Etrog.
So the din is like this. If it's a communal lulav and Etrog, according to halacha, belongs to everybody. It's a shutfis, it's a partnership. Because the kohol is a partnership. A partnership means everybody owns part of it. So halachically, they talk about this in Poskim, that a communal lulav and Etrog, everybody could be eitzah with, because it's all...
So your wife is also part of your...
Huh?
Your wife, she can bench it without getting the matalan.
Yeah, but then she can't make a bracha on it.
As in communal.
But whatever belongs
Communal, everybody's able to make a bracha, because communal means it's partnership with everybody else involved.
So you should tell her matalan.
The wife? Chatchil, you told the wife it should be matanim
What's
l'sachse.
the difference between a wife and a kal? I think it's
So if you give matana, you
a
never get
family and a kal.
Lulav and Etrog she'll give back. You give her a diamond, she's not giving it back. I understand what you're asking.
What's this in terms of a kal versus a...
A call belongs to everybody. That's the
What's
halacha.
the difference between a family and a kal?
You want to talk your technical, if it's community property, yeah, then if it's community property, like in California, everything the husband owns is 50% owned by the wife, yeah, then you don't have to give it to her as a gift. She can bench on it and use it. The minig ha'olam is if you have a general idea, whoever is doing it, you don't have to say by each one, matanim l'sachse.
And the person that has to know is the one that's giving it, or the person that's receiving it also has to know?
No, they don't have to know. As long as you give it to them, it's
So you
fine.
can never, you don't have to literally say to everybody, it's like you can have in mind that it's matana. So you better say.
The minig, nobody does. Even the last year, Tavshin Bais, when the Rebbe is standing there until 3 o'clock in the afternoon with Benjamin, the Rebbe didn't say matanim l'sachse to everybody. He was giving l'chatchila matanim l'sachse. The general knowledge was he's giving matanim l'sachse. Machin is doing mes merve b'mayim kim shivlag al teira b'chanan kashem med. Dort geht Woche sagt so wie